So, Jordan, I guess the first question is, what does a man without a position do during practice? Explain what you're.
A lot more than I thought. A lot more than I thought. Yeah. It's really, you know, and Neil says this all the time within our staff is kind of the viewpoint that you take. It's a little more of a 30,000 foot view rather than or actually probably a little, 40,000 foot view rather than a 30,000 foot view of everything that's going on. And it's really more, the important thing for me to all the guys is the voice and them hearing, whether it's fundamentals or whether it's scheme, just that reassurance from me that, hey, this is how, number one, we expect to do things, and this is, how that we do things, whether it's fundamentally, schematically, whatever it is. That's the biggest thing for me is being able to touch every part of the defense, and that may be in meetings, that may be in individual time at practice, maybe anything outside of the team period, which I always have. So, and that's good. That's good for me. It's good for the relationship side of things all across the board. It reaffirms whatever message we have, whether it's by the day or maybe it's by the spring or maybe it's just overall what we're trying to get better at, what we're trying to do. It's just reinforcement of the message.
So during meetings, do you float from room to room? How do you do that? And do you think you end up concentrating more with one group than another?
No. The simple answer is no. I don't think I will. Answer the last question first, and then the first question is, yeah, I'll float around. There's also some things. Vic's been here now for a couple months, and so there are some things that that I play catch up with him. As we get as the installs get a little deeper. So if there's where I spend a little more time than others, is probably there at outside backer, just getting him up to speed. But honestly, that's not something I'm really worried about with him. So it's really just whatever the importance is of that day. There's sometimes, again, it's a message. Sometimes it's a certain fundamental. Sometimes it's a schematic thing. And what needs to be the most important part of that is where I'll spend my time.
What are your thoughts of Vic so far?
The same as I've known him a long time. And here's when people ask me about hiring Vic, we coached and recruited against each other in the Sun Belt, and as a position recruiter, especially in your first couple years of your career at whatever the next highest level is, you're really, really out there trying to find an edge. And one thing that always stuck out to me is everywhere I thought I was by myself, that guy walked in. It's Saturday morning wrestling tournaments or everybody I had to fight for, I usually had to fight because we coached the same position. I had to fight against him in recruiting. And that told me all I needed to know in recruiting. And then on the flip side of that is working camps and clinics and things. I've been around him on the grass, which was probably the difference in everybody else that was being considered, is I've been on the field with him and the energy he brings. And if you just look, I just always look at a guy's production in their unit. And everywhere he's been, his units have been productive in an area we need improvement. And so all those things, for me, it was the perfect hire.
Coaches kind of say that it's a copycat business, right? Are you copying like anybody what you're doing specifically? Like, is there a model you've looked at? Like, okay, how did this guy do what I'm about to do? Was like this walk around coach?
No, not really. I'm really kind of doing this. I know some guys that do, and I guess it really just never. I'll probably pick their brains after spring when I kind of go back and kind of self-scout where we are, and then how some things need to be, if they need to be handled different. But I really haven't. I think you see it more and more now with the number of coaches some people have and there's some rule changes, but I think has been more of a little bit of an NFL thing. But there are more and more college guys that are walking around. So I really haven't thought, Mike, to to ask anybody.
This is not possible 5 or 6 years ago because of the support staff and how much more you can do with. So I guess what you've done on that side, GAs, analysts, and all that, not only how you deploy them, but how you hire them too. How much does that change to enable you, but also who you're putting in those spots?
Yeah, and I think it goes back to like with Vic, even Randy Wilkins, who's one of our analysts, Trey Bell, who's our other analyst, is everybody in that defensive staff room at some point has been in a coaching, teaching, and or recruiting environment with those guys. And that was one of the things that I was very adamant about in the evaluation process of the candidates, was those are the things I wanted to know. I wanted to have a really good knowledge of how good a teacher they were, how good they were on the grass, and where and who and how productive they had been in recruiting. And that was really the things that I looked at the most. And so you're right. I mean, 5 years ago, it's not even, you couldn't do it. But having those guys in those roles, and all those things, you know, to me, just coach to coach equals trust. So that was the biggest thing.
Jordan, look at your defense as a whole. Start with the newcomers. I mean, you guys, I don't know, at least a half dozen on your side of the football. So give me a little evaluation on what you've seen, not just day one, but what you think of those guys.
You know, I'll start with really kind of the guys that have been here the longest. Aiden Garnes is a guy we really got a good look at, you know, going back to last year. Is a skill set we need. He's long, he can really run, has a knack, can play the ball in the air. You know, Ty French, I mean, he is, I mean, his production, I think it at FCS speaks for itself. And his, you know, number one, he has a motor, and then number two is his juice, he's got some jets off the edge, which is something that we needed. T.J. Jackson, you know, a guy that is extremely explosive. Again, that has shown in his tape and in his production. The two kids from Northwestern are really, you know, they really don't know as much, but from what I saw today, there's some promising things there, just skill set wise, and the time they've been here to work out with us. You know, our freshmen that have come. T.J. Crandall is a guy again that can really run. You know, corner was a spot of emphasis for us, and speed, playing the ball in there was the top two things there. I think we've gotten faster with the additions.
Then the
Freshmen, you know, you start up front with Elijah, Obi, Nate. Those are going to be really good players. Probably a little more of a learning curve for them, just the nature of the position going from high school to college. You know, and I'm sorry, let me go back. Reed Carrico. Reed Carrico's a guy that I've been really impressed with. Not only how he works, but how he understands, I think, the position of linebacker. As, you know, through the drills and stuff we've done in the winter phase, is a skill set that I think can really help us there. You know, it's the deepest with getting Trotter back and Trey back. It's the deepest we've been at linebacker the whole time. But he's much needed help there and has done a good job. You know, freshman-wise, covered the guys up front. Secondary, you know, you're talking about today is Zay Jennings. You know, he's one you definitely you have to say whoa, way more than giddy up. He only knows one speed. And Israel Boyce those are going to be two that I think will really help us. I think they'll help us this year in some capacity, provide us really quality depth early, and then I think the further it goes, the more they develop, the more they'll help.
So, I mean, corner was an area of emphasis, and your whole defensive backfield. I mean, you got a couple guys coming back, but you sort of have to rebuild. Do you think you've got the talent there to do that, or is there still needs back there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the pieces are there. You know, you always have to have. You know, I said this last year going in the season. You know, there's always those second or third year guys that, you know, if you're counting on true freshmen, you're not That's not really fair. Some are better than others, but it's not really fair to them. And shouldn't have to do it, but sometimes you do. But it's always those second or third year guys. And I said this last year, Trey Latham was a guy we said going in that had to really perform for us. And he did. And if you look at us through 5 ball games, which was the TCU game, all right, and then kind of right after that, you see this dip, and then you really kind of come back up. And that was a guy that we talked about. Well, this year I see it, and it's in the secondary. And it's really, just to name a couple, the Jackson twins, they need to be good players for us. Aiden Nelson needs to be a good player for us. Those are guys that need to help us. And if they do, then yes, the talent is there, and then that'll be the deepest that we've been at those positions, especially at the second and third level. Like Aubrey's a guy that's gonna swing around and play some multiple positions for us. And so those are guys that to answer your question simply, the talent's there, but it's that development, it's that second year where they got to really show up.
Secondary linebacker, you like the depth there. What about up front? Do you like what you guys got? Do you need some more people, or?
I'm never gonna say no to a great player. Yeah, I think that is something that we have continued to build. That's really where we started in 2019, and that was a room that had to be totally rebuilt, and for a number of reasons, schematically different, and all the things that go into that. But that is something that really over the last 3 years that AJ's kind of taken and done a nice job. I think that. And again, I think that there's some young pieces in there that, depending on the next 15 practices, 30 days, and then the summer, I think that can help us early. And again, if we talk about the same guy in the front, I just talked about with Jordan and Josiah and Aiden, Corey McIntyre. That's a guy that has shown a lot of promise, and if he develops in his second year and does what we think he can do, he'll be a guy that really, really can help us up front.
You mentioned that this is the fastest you've probably been. Talk a little bit about what speed means, speed and quickness, and the difference between the two.
Well, it's more significant than people think. If there's one thing that I think that me personally, that I've really honestly never put a lot of stock in is track times. And I put a little more stock in the 40, but not as much as I do the pro agility. And, I think if corner is something that stands out, that, hey, you obviously want those guys to be extremely fast, and you want to pay attention to their 40 time. But like I said, I paid more attention to the 40 than I do if they run track times. And the rest of it is short area quickness. And because that's where the game of football is played. D-line, linebackers, even your safeties to a certain extent, they're very rarely are you running over 20 yards in any given play. You're right. And that's what I tell them all the time. Like, if we're running 40s during a game, we're not very good. Like, you're not. We're getting beat anyway, so 4-6 versus 4-5 really doesn't matter. So it's the pro agility, the 5-10-5 drills, L drills, anything short area, cone drills. We do a lot more of those, especially in the last 3 years in our camp stuff when we're evaluating recruits. A lot more of that matters to me. And, the time, there's all kinds of things that go into a time of a drill like that. I'm just watching the burst of speed out of the change of direction. And that is a way more of a important defensive evaluation to me than straight line speed. But, I'm not devaluing speed in any way. And I can just tell watching this, through 10-yard burst, 12-yard bursts that we're faster than we have been.
Not that you can do anything about it, but how big a shame is it that Asani Redwood's going to miss the spring? I guess a second straight one. Hurt a lot in his development. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate for him, but the score at the end of spring is going to be 0-0, and our record's still going to be 0-0. So anytime that any player, especially a really, really good player, which I think Asani is, you know, I want him healthy when our record is counted. And so, you know, if something happens or if something has been happening, they need to get something fixed. Well, this is when I would rather them go ahead and get it fixed. You know, and Asani does everything that he's asked to do in rehab, just like he did with his knee. You know, he was way ahead of a lot of people coming off of an ACL, and you know, I mean, I think you throw him in that boat of people that if he performs well, we'll be fine. But it is unfortunate for him. I know he wants to be out there developing and practice, but I think he plays catch up as good as anybody, so he'll be fine.
That's one for me. Jackson Twins, safety and corner. I mean, where one's one, one's the other. Where are they?
Yeah, so Jordan plays corner, Josiah plays safety. You know, and really when you most of the time that determination is just based on skill set and where the position fits the person better. You know, Josiah is he's taller, longer, and we need some height and length back there in those positions to get a little to affect some windows. And then Jordan is probably a little quicker, a little faster. Just skill set fits a little different.
You survived daddy-daughter dance? I saw the pictures.
Yeah, barely. But I did. I did right after a Disney cruise, so I survived both of them. I'm 2-0 in the month of March.
Thanks, Coop.
Thanks, guys.